Hi, I think most of you know me, but my name is Stephanie Dainow. Actually, last week was my 2-year anniversary as a full-time employee in this field. But I've been thinking about this for a very long time, since I was in high school, actually. So it's an honor to be here and to speak with you. And I'm actually going to talk about a couple things that were mentioned in terms of marketing, in terms of historical references for learning, in terms of resources that are available. But I also know there's a lot of questions about SENS Research Foundation and Lifespan, so maybe I'll start with that. First of all, does anyone not know either of those organizations? Lifespan.io, SENS Research Foundation. Okay, these are historical organizations, and we have announced a merger back in April. And so what this also demonstrates is that we are at a point in time where the industry is actually making some serious momentum. Because if you stay as an independent entity, you can go so far, but I think the crux of what we're all talking about here is collaboration and sharing education, knowledge, ideas, and also challenging each other to think a bit differently. So what I will say is that Lifespan.io is about 10, 11 years old now. SENS Research Foundation is 16. I don't know if everyone's aware, but there's a 11,000 square foot research facility about 10 minutes from here in Mountain View, which is pretty amazing. I've been spending some time there recently. I am now officially the chief business officer there, and I'm also still board executive and executive director at Lifespan.io. So I've been busy, hence my lack of slides, so thank you for bearing with me. This research center is really incredible. The passion of the people there is unparalleled. I haven't seen anything like it. But what's also really interesting is that no one else here has either. Nobody has been there to see what's going on. No one has talked to the scientists. I think I brought more people on tour there in the last month than they've seen in 10 years. I know you're smiling, Nicole. So one thing I want to say is that we have extra lab space for startups. We have state-of-the-art equipment. So if you're interested, please feel free to reach out. That is one thing I would like to offer. If you know students who actually want some education on how to be the next longevity scientist, you're not going to get that in your standard traditional academic setting. But we're offering that, and we're putting people in labs like Michael Snyder's all over the country and the world. And what we're doing is we're creating these specific educational models that teach them how to think differently, because academics is a bit constricting. You are incentivized to publish, not to solve. And I think this workshop here that Allison and Mark and LBF have created demonstrates how important it is to actually think critically, work together, and brainstorm. We react really, really fast, but no one's actually digging deep and trying to solve, which is hard. And therefore, what you see is lots of different people and companies doing the same thing in parallel, not sharing information, obviously not sharing IP because of incentive structures and so on. This is harder than hard. And we're all here together to try and make it easier. But what I would say is that communication does matter. Marketing does matter, all right? So I'll get back to that. SENS. SENS is offering an opportunity to help grow the field. Same with Lifespan. That is why they're merging. Lifespan.io started as a crowdfunding platform, gave early stage research access to visibility and funding that they otherwise wouldn't have. Excuse me. And then it expanded because of its success into a news outlet. Arkady is here. He's one of our top journalists. He's raising his hand in the back. If you have newsworthy information, go to him. What I would say about the outlet, the news outlet, is that there's a code of ethics. You cannot pay us to write about you. So everything there is responsible information. And that also ties into the marketing issue, right? How do you know what's real? And the public's mentality matters. And we are in an echo chamber right here. And we're listening to each other talk at the same conferences in the same places. So I'm really glad that the structure of this workshop was what it was. It's different. We need to start thinking outside of the box. So Lifespan.io also, in addition to capturing everything that's happening in this field, has an investor network. Raise of hands, who has either pitched or is an investor in the network? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so if you don't know about it, the value is that we've been around for several years. All the startups come through the platform. It is a facilitated professional meeting once or twice a month, and we give you visibility to investors. The count last week was 350, and they range from angels to mid-sized funds, and we're expanding. And I'm actually targeting, in the last couple of months, the non-scientist investors, and I'm working on changing the narrative for us. Because of the existence of the investor network and the news outlet, basically means that we're a one-stop shop. we know everybody. And if you don't know us, we'd like to know you. And we'd like to offer you the opportunity to get in front of others through the news outlet, through the investor network. We've also started this support service. We're helping the startups actually rethink their deck, rethink their business model, their pitch methods. And we're facilitating, it's kind of like a matchmaking service, one-on-one introductions. And the success rate in the last 4 months has been over 65%. The startups walk away with offers of 6 figures. We are here to help. Sends and Lifespan.io coming together basically means that we're converging, we are sharing resources, administrative, research, and otherwise, for the purpose of serving this field for you. That is why we exist. 16 and 9 years ago, these organizations helped develop and curate what we've come to today with the help of other organizations as well. But they're pretty, everyone knows who they are. We're here to help accelerate progress. So with that said, marketing is a big thing. What's my timing?
1 minute.
Okay. Let's talk about why people think it's science fiction. Okay, imagine that we are in, I don't know, the olden days and we have a horse and buggy and someone next to you says, do you know in a couple decades you're going to be flying around in metal machines with wings that go across oceans? They'll think you're crazy. 1969, we're on the moon. Right? And then you say, well, a couple decades, we're going to have this smartphone that has this thing called the internet. And oh, by the way, it has more computing power than that which we use to get up to space. They can't see it. So then when you say, well, we can live forever, or we're going to be able to eradicate age-related diseases, they can't see it. What we need to do is understand that people don't understand us. So we need to get curious about how we're being received, the language we're using. You have to understand where they're coming from in order to actually get them to be responsive and attentive. So then the question is, what does longevity mean? What the hell does it mean? There is no consensus, and we have to recognize that. So before you start talking to somebody and going in depth, ask them what their perspective is. And then you have a baseline that you can frame your idea around. It's much more successful that way. And so what we're trying to do at Lifespan is also to translate the challenging, complicated science into something that a layperson can understand. Because clearly, funding is an issue, being understood is an issue. And I can go into a lot more. I know I don't have time. There's news coming out about what the merger is going to look like. I am going to be talking with a few people later today at one of the tables if you'd like to sit around and check it out. And there's a lot to cover, but we're getting there. And what my suggestion is that think differently about not only what you're saying, but how the person is receiving it and what their mindset is first, and you'll be a lot more effective.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? When is
I answered
your
everyone's
discussion
question.
table?
That's up to you.
Okay, well, we will notify the WhatsApp group if you guys are interested. Other questions, comments? Well, why don't you talk a little bit more about the communications bit that you mentioned? Like any other tips? Like I like the one of like first asking them what they think longevity is and then telling and weaving your own narrative.
So something that I'm actually working on personally right now is educating myself on psychology, but not your standard psychology. What drives someone? What motivates them? And you know, Michael had a good question about historical lessons. What does it take to be successful? People are going to have different answers. Hold on, I had a note here that I wanted to talk about. For example, remember we said space was a historical reference with the last speaker. So I went to Singapore and spoke in front of NUS and the government, and the dean asked me to make longevity kind of like a exciting thing because money wasn't being allocated accordingly to the researchers. So I framed it as the equivalent of a space race, right? We had the space race. It's a longevity race. What are we racing for? Time. Time is priceless. Look at the framing there, right? It's not just, oh, well, we can live forever. If you're talking to a government, what do they want? Power. Time is priceless power. That's one example of framing, right? Yes? Any nods? Okay. Another idea that I had that I wanted to talk about, storytelling is really important. I met with someone from the CIA last week, and I was asking them about persuasion tactics. And he basically said, do not brief. Tell a story. Have a conversation. And I was like, what do you mean by briefing? And he's like, well, you know, when I had people go down and brief the president, they say, well, I read off the list of what's going on. No, that's not what they want. They want to engage. You have to bring them on a journey with you. So instead of just talking, stop in the middle of a sentence. I cut myself off oftentimes. I'm like, wait, are you following? I think some of you have heard me talk, right? I'll speak at conferences, but hold on, how many people actually understand what I'm saying? And it's okay if you don't, because it is challenging, right? And right there, I gave them an out. I gave them an opportunity to not feel embarrassed that they didn't know. Let me tell you a quick story. I was at MIT in April with a group of wealthy individuals that are non-scientists. And it was a fascinating talk. A scientist actually got up, one of the researchers, put a bunch of charts up, standard scientific language, documentation, visuals, etc. And I was going around texting some of the wealthy individuals in real time, and I said, tell me, do you actually understand what he's saying? And they're like, no. I said, okay, say something. So one of them raises their hand, and they say, okay, can you pretend I'm a 6th grader? And he says, okay. So he tried. Someone else was like, if that's 6th grade, I'm in kindergarten. It wasn't working. And so then later, I went up to these individuals, and I was like, what'd you think? And they said, my head's spinning. And I was like, well, does that mean I can't talk to you about longevity? They're like, no, I can't handle it anymore. What's happened? They have gotten overwhelmed. They've gotten embarrassed about their lack of knowledge. They cannot compute. It is an uncomfortable feeling. So despite how exciting your project is, they're not ready to receive it. So understanding how they feel and where they're at is a key to being able to market and communicate efficiently. So then what did I do? With one of those guys, I went out to dinner and I said, tell me about your family. And he said, well, my dad's really sick and he has dementia. Let's start there. See? Okay, I'll pause.
Thank you.
Hopefully that helps.